The US military has confirmed that about 700 Marines will be sent to Los Angeles to deal with the ongoing protests there. The protests were sparked by a surge in ICE arrests as part of President Trump's immigration policies. He caused controversy by sending National Guard troops to deal with the situation. California's Governor Gavin Newsom has said that he's going to sue President Donald Trump over his decision to deploy the National Guard to the city. He also called the plan to deploy Marines a deranged fantasy of a dictatorial president. Well, Trump has defended his decision to deploy National Guard troops to LA.
Thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped in a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job. So I want to thank them very much.
DW's Benjamin Alvarez Gruber is covering the protest for us, and he gave me an update on the situation from downtown Los Angeles.
It's definitely not getting calmer here in downtown Los Angeles. Behind me, you can see a group of protesters facing riot police, LAPD, but also members of the National Guard. And the decision that the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department, now took is to go in so-called tactical alert, meaning that police forces will have the possibility to even quicker respond to the situation in the city. There are several choppers flying above us. There's also a standoff on this side, so there are also riot police waiting there. And of course, the news that there will be hundreds of US Marines being deployed to the city will also not lead to the situation here on the ground to calm down.
That's right. The US military has confirmed that about 700 Marines, right, are being deployed to LA. What more can you tell us?
That's right. They will help and support the members of the National Guard that are here. They would say that they will not be involved directly in the logistics, and that's very important here. So we have several law enforcement bodies. We have police on one side. They're specialized on taking care of situations like this, taking care of protests, and that's also what the governor, the Democratic governor of California, has said and repeatedly slammed the decision to send National Guards and now to send Marines. He called it un-American because they have weapons. They are not trained also for the work that riot police is doing. There have been a lot of different protest groups here also on the other side of the building. This is the so-called federal building. There's a detention center over there. They came out, said, "Where are the families? ¿Dónde están las familias?" In Spanish. We saw some of them throwing bottles at the cars. So the situation here on the ground remains tense, and everybody's wondering what will happen in the next couple of hours.
Why is the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, so opposed to the Trump administration's response to these protests?
So we're having here two different ways of dealing with this crisis, and that shows also how difficult the situation is that is being now set in court. The governor of California, the state of California, is suing the Trump administration because they said it's illegal, the move to mobilize the National Guard. Usually it's the governors that have the authority to decide when to activate the National Guard. That's in times of peace. But in times of rebellion or risk of rebellion, it's up to the president to decide that. This is the first time since 1965 that the president is deciding to deploy part of the National Guard. He spoke about 2,000. The figures that we have is around 300 are here in the city. But this is the first time since 1965 that actually the president decided to deploy the National Guard without consulting the governor of that state, doing it with the opposition of the governor. So that's exactly what we will see in court here. But in the meantime, we are waiting also to get more information from the US military that, as you said, confirmed that they will be deploying hundreds of active Marines to support the National Guard here that is supporting LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department.
All right, we'll leave it there, Benjamin. Do stay safe. DW's Benjamin Alvarez Gruber reporting for us from Los Angeles. Well, let's speak now with Scott Anderson. He's a lawyer and fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution. Great to have you on DW News. So, California's Governor Gavin Newsom wants to sue President Donald Trump over his decision to deploy the National Guard. Can you explain to us what Newsom is claiming to have been illegal?
Absolutely. The authority that the president used to call up the National Guard, independent of the governor, is a statute that allows the president to take that step in situations of invasion, of rebellion, or where he can't enforce federal law with the existing forces available to him. Governor Newsom is challenging whether those conditions are met. He's also raising the issue that that statutory provision says that the order will be going through the governor of the state, who is the traditional commander of the National Guard. That wasn't done in this case. That appears to be more of a procedural misstep. I'm not sure you would read the statute to say that invalidates what the president has done, but the challenge to whether the conditions were met under which the president can take this action is a much more substantive one. It's the sort of thing the president usually gets a lot of deference on from our courts, but that doesn't mean it's an automatic win.
All right. Now, if the courts rule in favor of Trump, what impact could this have on the power of the states?
You know, President Trump is kind of by default getting his way because he is the commander in chief. The military is following his understanding of the law by his directions until it's corrected by a court. I think if you get a judicial ruling here, it might help put the president's actions on stronger legal footing. It might make him more willing to do similar things in the future. But I don't think it really kicks the door open for anything dramatically new. This is in an area where it's been assumed the president gets a lot of discretion and deference from the courts for a long time. Meanwhile, if the state of California wins, however, that really is a sign that courts are willing to be subject the president's decisions to much greater scrutiny in this space, and that could be a pretty significant constraint. That's why I suspect the administration is going to fight this one all the way to the Supreme Court if it has to.
Right. Well, Trump's immigration policies, of course, affect the entire United States. So from what you're saying, could we see then similar scenarios play out in other states?
You absolutely could. The memorandum President Trump issued authorizing this particular action actually is not limited to California. It really notes just that ICE personnel and other federal personnel are facing these sorts of threats, and it is mobilizing them, National Guard, to address those threats. Also worth noting, it's not just using mobilized National Guard units. Those Marines you're talking about are active duty military. This statute that's being challenged in the in the California case, isn't actually needed for active duty military because they're already report to the president. You don't need to call up National Guard units. And they're operating under a kind of inferred authority to protect federal people and property. That doesn't mean they can go serve warrants. That doesn't mean they can go arrest people. It's actually a very limited scope of duty that they're authorized to do under this theory. We all just have to watch and make sure they're actually being used that way, which is a little bit more established. If they push beyond it, that's a sign that the Trump administration is doing things that are much more unprecedented even than what we're seeing today.
All right, you're saying unprecedented. So there have been some very harsh accusations made against Trump from Democrats particularly. Are we witnessing an attempt to erode the constitutional system in the US then?
I don't know if we're quite at the point of eroding the constitutional system. The Constitution does anticipate using military forces to suppress insurrections and enforce federal law where necessary. You can debate whether those conditions are met here. I think the state of California has a very plausible case that they are not. But that sort of action, use of the military, is anticipated in the Constitution, and Congress has authorized it in at least certain circumstances. What you are definitely seeing is the erosion of the broader norm and values that usually say using the military is an absolute last resort. It's something presidents usually try and avoid. Instead, here, the president is turning it to a situation where a lot of people on the ground are saying this is not necessary, this is counterproductive, this is even dangerous. And instead, the president has turned to it relatively quickly in response to, compared to prior deployments of the military, relatively limited conflict and need so far. That could be a significant shift. It's less about the Constitution, more about the values that inform how the authorities the Constitution provides have historically been used.
Great speaking to you tonight, Scott. Very interesting having your analysis in the show. Scott Anderson from the Brookings Institution. Thanks.
Thank you.
And let's bring in Barry McDonald. He is a professor of law at Pepperdine University and joins us from Westlake Village. Great to have you on DW News. So Governor Gavin Newsom said in an interview that Trump's move to send in the National Guard was, quote, by definition illegal. What's your take?
Well, federal law allows the president to call in the National Guard and even in the military under different laws. And the law that he's using right now says that the National Guard and the military can be called in cases of rebellion for the purposes of protecting federal interests. In these cases, federal officers and federal facilities, property, etc. So the key issue here is there really a rebellion here, or is this just a protest that has occasionally become violent? It's there is no definition of rebellion in the law. Courts usually defer to president's determinations on that unless it's just patently unreasonable. So, but that's what's going to be the issue in court, is whether there was really a rebellion here that justified calling in the National Guard and the military.
Now, there's been a lot of criticism, particularly obviously from Democrats. The former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wrote on X that, quote, "This is a hallmark of authoritarianism on the road to tyranny," and, quote, "Americans should be shocked and appalled by Trump's blatant disregard for the constitutional system." Is he eroding that system with his actions and executive orders?
Well, it's the typical norm in our country before you send in the National Guard, or you federalize the National Guard, or you send in the military, to consult with the governor of a state, to consult with the local officials as to the need for that. The first line response is typically the police, the LA Police Department is being deployed in this situation. And so there are those that claim that this is a very heavy-handed response that isn't really warranted because Mayor Bass, Governor Newsom say that they have the situation under control with local law enforcement authorities. And so there are those that claim that this is really just sort of a shock and awe tactic designed to chill people, designed to basically say, look, if you don't get with the program in terms of allowing federal officials access to immigrants that may not be here legally, to deport them, there's going to be trouble, and the federal government is going to take a more active role in that.
Now, firstly, is the court system, how long would that process take? And then secondly, if the administration was found to have acted illegally, what consequences would there be? So the state of California has sued, and they're going to be requesting some sort of temporary restraining order or preliminary injunctive relief that allows a court to rule quickly on a temporary basis until a more full hearing can be held. So these issues can be litigated in stages, where a court, can make a preliminary ruling and then reserve final judgment until there's a forward development of the factual record. So this could happen quickly. The judge could say, either, this is clearly not a rebellion, or the president is entitled to deference on that particular issue. If indeed it's found that President Trump deployed the National Guard and the military in violation of the law, the real remedy here would just be an injunction to tell the president to withdraw those troops. All right, we'll leave it there. Professor of Law, Barry McDonald from Pepperdine University. Great to have your expertise and insights tonight. Thanks a lot. Take care. Thank you for having me.